Hello, everybody. Welcome to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and I am here with you to learn about our furry, scaly, or slimy friends. And this episode, we are going into specifically the furry friends, more actually hairy friends than anything. We're looking at the bonobo monkey, so primate species. I love primates. You guys know from actually the most popular episode on the show is still the first episode, which is the orangutan episode. If you guys want to listen to that, go ahead and listen to it. It was in the first podcast here. And we are now actually, I believe, on our 20th episode celebration. This is the 20th episode of the show, and we are doing another primate. Won't you look at that? I guess we can choose a primate every so often. So how you can listen to the show. This show is entirely up to you, how you'd like to listen to it. Maybe you are at home and you just want to relax. It seems as though many of you guys out there really enjoy this podcast as a nightly sort of ritual. So you throw on the podcast and you kind of just drift off to sleep, which is entirely encouraged, and it's it's one of the many uses of this podcast. If you're just walking around in the middle of the day, maybe you're at work or maybe you're stuck in traffic, things like that sometimes can be a little bit tougher. It's always good to have a healthy focus, and in this case, it's always animals here. So really quickly, just reminding all you guys out there that if you want to submit any kind of mail to me on relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, I take all of your suggestions for animals and I will be doing them on future podcasts. So if you are interested in seeing your animal on the podcast and maybe get a shout out if you'd like one, go ahead and send me an email, and we can kind of collaborate to that degree, because I really love the connection between you guys, because this podcast is a lot for you. It's majority for you. I just enjoy doing it. I love to learn, and I'm sure that all of you guys listening to the podcast love to learn too. And in this case, we're going to be learning about one of my favorite animals, the bonobo. So let's get into the show. This episode we have plenty of facts. We have a lot of them, so I'm going to try not to ramble on too much. This episode might be a little bit longer unless I talk a little bit more fast and not let myself go on these little asides. So I got my facts from justfunfacts.com, worldwildlife.org, ollie.org, which is awely.org, never used that source before, and britannica.com. I think that's where I got the name stuff. Okay, anyways. So, bonobos are active during the day and move on all fours by knuckle walking. So we have this same sort of locomotion that is very common among primates, which is knuckle walking. If you guys listen to the orangutan podcast, if you guys want to watch really amazing, I watched some YouTube videos recently from a YouTube channel called the Smithsonian Channel, and on there they have orangutan school videos where they're out in the forest with orangutans, and I believe it's in Indonesia, and they rescue orphaned orangutans and sort of teach them to be able to go off on their own, because from that episode, if you guys remember, or if you're new, the infants are completely reliant on their mothers, so for the first around 8 years of their life, and they take these animals, these beautiful animals, and they kind of get them back on track by being pretty much surrogate mothers. So there's so many little stories on that channel, and it's just amazing. It's so amazing to watch. They're like real children. So anyways, that's an aside. But bonobos are active during the day, and they move on all fours by knuckle walking. And knuckle walking is a way of locomotion with the fingers. Okay, so it's this is as opposed to fist walking. So if you make a fist and you look at what part of your finger is being used to contact the ground, these are fist walkers. Knuckle walkers, if you extend just a little bit of your fingers, you'll see you have another sort of section. So those are your middle phalanxes or phalanges of your fingers, and that is what is referred to as knuckle walking. Not so much the fist walking, but many monkeys kind of switch it up as they go, especially the orangutans, which we covered already. These are actually our primary ancestor. What I mean by that is just that in terms of evolutionary lineage, they are right up front. They're right next to human beings, closer than orangutans, closer than gorillas, like the great apes, chimpanzees even. We share approximately 98.7% of our DNA with bonobos. And many people haven't heard of bonobos before, but it's they're our closest living relative to human beings, right? So they're our closest primate cousins. So whenever I see numbers like this, I always think there's something to learn from these guys. They're so close to us, and we'll get into some of the habits of these guys because they are some of the most peaceful apes there are. They resolve almost all conflict. From what I was reading, there was no documented sort of findings of bonobos having any interpersonal conflicts, really, even between groups most of the time. So these guys are really peaceful, and we'll talk about how they get to be that way, and maybe we can learn a little something. So they oftentimes are a little bit smaller, a little bit leaner, and just a little bit darker than chimpanzees. They are it's fairly easy, I feel, to kind of mix these guys up between, with chimpanzees, but they do have their own features, but it's mostly in terms of habituation, the things that they do, rather than physical characteristics that you can really, really tell a difference with. So after humans, bonobos spend the most time being bipedal of all the great apes. So as opposed to being quadrupedal. So bipedal is the position of walking upright, which is something that human beings have done for a long, long time. So modern humans, we've walked this way for a while. But a quick aside about human beings, and with bipedalism, for example, human beings are not actually very efficient bipedal creatures. We run into problems all the time. We have joint pains. We it's very easy for us to sort of injure from just walking, right? And you don't really see that with a lot of other animals. So we are not that efficient when it comes to bipedalism, even though we are the forefront of that sort of movement. But with the bonobos, they spend about 20 to 25% on their hindquarters when they're traveling on the ground. This is excluding times where they are in the trees because they are arboreal, as are the vast majority of the primate species. One super interesting thing is that they are matriarchal. Okay, what that means is that they are female-dominated, female-centric sort of groups. So they have female leaders that lead the groups, which is something that is very, very uncommon, especially among ape species. In the case of gorillas, for example, which we covered on a previous episode, they have a system, this regular system, well, regular just meaning common in terms of primates, of having one kind of alpha male having access to all the different females of the group. But in the case of bonobos, this absolutely isn't the case. So the females will form groups with each other in order to even control certain males that they might feel can get out of hand. So they have this really interesting sort of system going on, and one that is very uncommon and is really specific and unique to the bonobo, at least that I haven't really read about any other primate species that operates this way. I'm going to take a quick drink of my it's not really tea here, it's more of a coffee, but it's a decaffeinated sort of coffee. Really sort of odd tasting. I just kind of sometimes there's something laying around the house in terms of some decaf coffee, and this was some coconut, something like that. It doesn't taste the greatest, but it'll certainly do. So the bonobo is incredibly peaceful, as we mentioned before. We just didn't mention how exactly they maintain that peace. Among other things, the primary reason or the primary way they have of settling conflict is through mating or sex, right? Sex between each other. So whenever there's sort of a conflict, maybe between individuals in a group, engaging in these behaviors are really how they settle conflict. And because they are so peaceful, it is a really odd way of kind of settling conflict. Usually in many apes and in a lot of other species, they prefer to settle conflicts through violence, generally, whether it's or aggression or something, right? There's always some kind of chest pounding thing going on. But the bonobo has its own way of having this sort of balance in groups, and this is how they choose to do that. Wild bonobos can be found in forests south of the Congo River in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So if you want to see bonobos, I have never seen one in my entire life, or even at zoos, right? I've been to zoos before, but it's only been, I think, I've seen gorillas and chimpanzees in person. But bonobos, because they are native to the Congo and are only really found there. I'm sure they're at some zoo, somewhere in the world, maybe San Diego. I'm not sure, but if you want to see a wild bonobo, you have to go to the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, and they inhabit the heart of the Congo Basin, which is the second largest rainforest on Earth. And the bonobo habitat spans approximately 500,000 square kilometers or 193,000 square miles. So we have here second largest rainforest in the world. Those numbers, with the square miles and the square kilometers, those are kind of unfathomable, that's a tough word, numbers for me to really imagine. That is such a vast expanse of habitat. And it's something that is refreshing to hear, although I'm not sure when these facts were posted, but I'm sure that's kind of been diminishing a little bit as, the trend goes with deforestation. But it's good to see that wild bonobos are still having the time of their lives generally on this the second largest rainforest, which is the Congo Basin. The average lifespan of bonobos is about 40 years in captivity. Their lifespan in the wild is generally unknown. I'm going to imagine that it's a little bit less. Captivity almost every time will increase the lifespan of the animal. Well, at least in primates, it's the general trend, by around 5 to 10 years. This because they don't have to really fight off infection completely on their own. They are given antibiotics if need be. They have caretakers. They have constant food. So there's no real fluctuation there. They can achieve more of a balance. The only thing they don't achieve a balance in is generally freedom, right? So that's the sort of trade-off that it usually takes. The adult bonobo, let's look at some physical characteristics here, weighs about 34 to 60 kilograms, which is around 75 to 132 pounds, and the female weighs around 30 kilograms, which is about 66 pounds. So females weigh generally on the lighter side of males, which is totally expected. It's how it usually is in these sorts of communities here, in these sorts of species rather. The head to body length, so that just means from the nose to the rump, while they're on all fours, ranges from about 70 to 83 centimeters. If any of you guys are using inches out there, we're looking at about 28 to 33 inches. And males can measure up to 1.2 meters or 4 feet tall when they're standing, and females about 1 meter, 3.3 feet tall, so not too far behind in terms of that. And the bonobo's head is relatively smaller than that of the common chimpanzee, with less prominent brow ridges above the eyes, so the eyebrows, right? It has a black face with pink lips, small ears, wide nostrils, and long hair on its head that forms a parting, just like humans, right? We have our own individual sort of partings on our heads, and I guess so do bonobos. I mean, these guys are really runner-up to human beings when it comes to evolutionary history. The bonobo also has a very slim upper body, narrow shoulders, it has a thin neck, long legs, when you compare it to a common chimpanzee. And I'm telling you these things because if you haven't, if this is kind of late at night for you, or if you're just kind of doing stuff at work to kind of, sometimes we forget as adults, if there's any adults listening out there, that we really don't use our imagination as much as we did when we were kids. So sometimes when I'm describing these things, it can be always a little fun to sort of paint the picture in your head of what this animal could look like if you haven't heard of it before or seen it before you search it up, and you see maybe how close you were. It's a little fun game you can play when you're sort of in traffic or late at night or whatnot, wherever you are out there. So their bodies are covered by coarse black hair, except for the face, the fingers, toes, palms of the hands, and soles of the feet. So that part generally is intuitive when someone thinks about a monkey. They don't see a monkey with hair all over their actual face. They see hair all around, not covering their palms or their feet. So that's more of an expected sort of expected physical trait there. Both of its thumbs and big toes are opposable, which allows for a very precise grip, which is extremely important seeing as these guys are arboreal. So you can imagine how tough it would be for these guys if they didn't have opposable thumbs on their feet, and if they didn't have these sort of these abilities with their feet. They would be kind of a little bit more like humans, right? Humans, while we do climb trees, and for any of you who have children out there, it's clear that everybody likes to climb trees, human beings, I mean. So just because we lost that ability to really use our feet in that same way doesn't mean we don't like to climb. But we are, of course, less efficient. We took trade-offs when we didn't purposely take trade-offs. I'm sure there are some people out there that would really rather have like hands for feet than have feet for feet. I'm sure that people would take that trade-off, but evolutionarily we have this for a reason, right? We are adapted to be the way we are, and we don't really spend as much time in trees as bonobos do. And it's such a crucial characteristic for these guys to have, because grasping, they're swinging around, they spend a lot of time in trees, and they need that precise grip to be able to maneuver this way. So this is an interesting thing. So we talked about the bipedal walking be about 20% of their locomotion when it comes to terrestrial movement, but it's about 20% in captivity when there's an abundant amount of food. But in the wild, they don't use this nearly as much. We're talking about 1/20th of the time walking on their hindquarters. So they can be observed walking on their hindquarters about 20% of the time when we're talking about strictly animals not in the wild, not bonobos, not wild bonobos, but ones that are in zoos or in some sort of facility. And they are very comfortable in trees. They will swing hand to hand through branches, exactly what you would expect, climbing up tree trunks and leaping from one tree to another. So they're extremely comfortable where they are. I'm going to take a really quick sip here. I really try not to go close to the microphone with that because this is not an ASMR podcast. Bonobos are omnivores, which means, so let's talk about the three really quickly to just a quick refresh, right? So there's herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. So omnivores meaning they eat a variety of foods that will include fruits, nuts, seeds, sprout, vegetation, and mushrooms. The fruits are generally, from what I've seen, really some of their favorites, right? It's always a treat for them. They eat various parts of plants, including the leaves, flowers, bark, stems, roots, pith. So pretty much almost all parts of the plant. And they will also eat small mammals if they have to, insects, earthworms, honey, eggs, soil. So these guys will eat a lot, which is why they're omnivores. They're not exactly as coordinated when it comes to hunting and whatnot, because chimpanzees, we haven't actually talked about chimpanzees, which is interesting, but we will on a future podcast. But they form hunting parties. Bonobos don't. Chimpanzees will really plan. It's a premeditated thing. They plan kind of a group to go and hunt for either other monkeys or some other sort of animal. But bonobos don't do this. They're more of an opportunistic sort of omnivore. So they are incredibly social animals. So they're very social, which is something that you would expect, and they express these sorts of things in different ways. Grooming is an incredibly important thing to these guys, and that's how they bond with each other, really, is grooming. But they will also make a variety of vocalizations and through touch and whatnot. So they're very highly social, and they need to be really around each other, or they really prefer to be, rather. And the party size tends, so when I say party size, it just means the size of the groups. It tends to vary because the groups exhibit a fission-fusion pattern. I am reading this for the first time. I have no idea what that is. which is a community of approximately 100 bonobos will split into small groups during the day while looking for food, and then they will come back together to sleep. And they will sleep in nests that they will construct in trees. So the same sort of thing with orangutans and many other monkeys or great apes there. So they split off to find food, which is, so they split off to forage so they can cover more ground, and they always come back together to sleep. Very important advantage here, because being together in groups really ensures the safety of everyone within that group. So there is always a reason why animals prefer to either be alone, solitary, or to be in groups. And adult bonobos will sometimes share a nest, which is a really unique behavior. There's generally a, too bad, so sad sort of attitude towards each other, or, you snooze, you lose, which is interesting how the bonobo differs in that way, that they have this sort of aspect of sharing and of almost kindness in a way. It's amazing to me. It blows my mind. So as I said before, they do use vocalizations, and they also use gestures. So they will communicate with a wide range of both of those. And they are the most vocal of the great apes, using complicated patterns of vocalizations to communicate detailed information. So incredibly intelligent animals. I don't have to explain that, because as you guys can understand from listening, these are very, very intelligent animals, and you'd expect them to be, because they're so close to us with our DNA. So breeding really occurs throughout the year, and females reach sexual maturity at around 12 years of age, and the gestation period is thought to be between 220 and 230 days, and they will normally give birth to a single young, but twins are still possible, of course. So they have to wait until 12, generally, to be able to breed, and their gestation period is somewhere in the middle there from the animals that we've covered, so kind of a normal one, not something that's out of what I would have expected. And infants are born virtually helpless, and they have to be carried everywhere by their mothers for the first 2 years. So this is a common theme among primates. Because they're so close to us, they really rely not only on their parents or their mothers for nourishment, but the most important thing is that they learn really by imitation. So that means that if they don't have their mother, they really won't know the skills that they need. They won't know how to do anything. It's not really an instinctual behavior like many other animals. They have to learn, and how they learn is through imitation. So that's why when I mentioned before that organization that takes orphaned orangutans and basically be their surrogate mothers, they show them how to forage, how to do different sorts of things, because this is how these animals learn. So they will stay close to their mom for several years while they grow and learn how to be a part of regular bonobo society. And the mother will give birth every 5 to 6 years, which will allow her time to really bond with her offspring. So she's not going to have, multiple babies and try to really focus her attention on each of them. It's much easier to focus on, one offspring at a time, to make sure that they are as viable as possible to live in the environment that they live in the Congo Basin in this case. So male offspring will remain with the mother's group for life, whereas the females will leave the maternal group for another when they mature. So super interesting that the males remain with the mother's group for life. This generally does not happen, and in the bonobo it does. I'm learning so much about these guys. I love primates, and I've learned a lot about primates, but bonobos, I'm still filling in the gaps here, so it's awesome. Apart from their number one predator, which is of course humans, crocodiles and leopards are also a threat. But humans are more, not only are they more directly dangerous to bonobos in terms of poaching or other kind of harming, it's also through habitat loss and through those secondary reasons where they die because they don't have the habitat that they need, right? Because they need a lot of space, of course, and they have a lot of space at the moment, but humans have a way of impacting animals in a variety of ways, not just directly. So crocodiles and leopards are a threat to these guys. The species is listed as endangered currently on the IUCN Red List and is threatened by habitat destruction and human population growth and movement because of commercial poaching being the main threat that I just talked about. There is no concrete data on population numbers, but they estimate around 29,500 and 50,000 individuals. So while this isn't really the worst case scenario, it's still not great. So they're still listed as endangered, and I'm sure that there's plenty of things that you can do to help these guys out. And I believe it's usually things to do with how you shop, or sort of more of an awareness sort of thing that it's happening. Along with the common chimpanzee, the bonobo is the closest extant, there's that word again, so that means the opposite of extinct, so alive, relative to humans. And because the two species are not proficient swimmers, the formation of the Congo River around 1.5 to 2 million years ago possibly led to the speciation of the bonobo. So what this article is suggesting is that the introduction to a new pressure for evolutionary change, in this case, happened to be the fact that they had trouble swimming. And when the Congo Basin formed, as many of you know, evolution is branching. It's not from one comes another, generally. So that whole evolutionary picture, I'm sure you've seen it before, it's caused so many misconceptions of evolution. But there's those shirts where they have, the lowest sort of monkey, and then the monkey slowly stands up into a human being. This is incredibly scientifically inaccurate and plain wrong. So it's kind of suggesting as if evolution is a linear process, but it absolutely is not. It's branching and bushy kind of everywhere. So we have common ancestors with other monkeys, and that's why there's sometimes a problem there when people make an argument of, if there are humans, why are there still monkeys? It's sort of a misunderstanding of how evolution works. And in this case, what this article is trying to say is that speciation occurred because of, a kind of new branch occurred because of a evolutionary pressure, of an adaptive pressure. And in that case, it is the Congo River that popped up around 1.5 to 2 million years ago. Don't know how accurate that is, but it's an interesting sort of theory there, or it might be confirmed to be true. I have no idea. I haven't looked too much into it, but it makes sense to me. So bonobos were described as a subspecies of chimpanzee in 1929, but identified as a separate species around 4 years later in 1933. And they're still the least understood of all the great apes out there. That could be because they're so centralized to one location, being the Democratic Republic of Congo, but relative to the other species, these guys we still have a lot of understanding to do. Some scientists believe that bonobos are the most intelligent of all the primates, excluding humans, of course, but maybe that's because they share many of our human behaviors, such as teaching their young social skills, like we talked about, using tools to get food, and working together for the good of the entire troop. So whenever there's sort of habits that have to do with sacrificing one thing for another, rather than acting completely instinctually and just for yourself, that shows a level of intelligence there, where they're doing something for the greater good in a way, for the good of the troop. That's really interesting. And bonobos are especially known for their ability to get along. So that is something that we already mentioned, but that is the main kind of takeaway that I'd like to take away from these guys, because they're so close to us evolutionarily, and they're able to find peace among conflict. How they do it is, it's not exactly what I think humans would do, or is a realistic proposal. What I'm saying is that if these guys can find peace, human beings can find peace away too. It's not as if it's impossible. It's just different. We're a different sort of species that calls for a different sort of thing. But I believe that there's a lesson to be learned from these guys here. Let's get into the final fact, which is the name. So I always like to end the podcast with a name, something to do with the name of the animal. And in this case, the bonobo appeared first in 1954 when Edward Paul Tratz and Heinz Heck proposed it as a new and separate generic term for pygmy chimpanzees. So the name is thought to be a misspelling on the shipping crate from the town of Bonobo on the Congo River. That's funny, which was associated with the collection of chimps in the 1920s. And the term has also been reported as being a word for ancestor in an extinct Bantu language, which I hope is true, because really that's such an apt term to use for these guys, because they are our closest living primate ancestor. So I absolutely loved this episode. I could talk all day about these guys. I love primates. I'm a little bit biased. So thank you very much for tuning in and for listening. I hope I was entertaining. If you maybe it's late at night and you would like to listen to another episode, you have 20 episodes to listen to. This is our 20th sort of episode anniversary. You can listen all the way through. I can entertain you for another I think full day, maybe a little more, or maybe a little less. But anyways, if you want to help the show out, we're still ad-free, guys. This is a relatively new podcast. The best thing you can do if you enjoy the show and want to support me and the show, you can share this with a friend. So sharing somewhat with somebody that maybe wants to relax a little bit, take the edge off with a little bit of animal facts, please go ahead and do so. It is so greatly appreciated. And I absolutely love all you guys out there listening from all around the world. If you want to hear your animal on the podcast, go ahead and send me an email, relaxwithanimalfacts@gmail.com, and I will see you all in the next episode with the next animal. Take care.